Good afternoon. It's Monday the 7th of July 2014, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host this afternoon, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, also in blue, Mike Robinson.
By special request.
By special request, apparently.
Can I just apologise for the tardiness at the start of the programme? Slight technical issue. But.
Okay, and we'll also say we have a mystery guest with us in the studio. Somebody who's popped in to have a look and see how we do this. And there we are. Now, weather. I'm being told that Penzance is cloudy with drops of rain. Rhyl, in contrast, is sunny. So a mixed bag across the country. But really the weather of small importance compared to what's really happening in Britain at the moment. So we have fantastic things unfolding. Let's just return to the dedication of our largest warship ever, HMS Queen Elizabeth. And of course, we had this wonderful ceremony up in Rosyth. The ship, I think, was named with a bottle of malt whisky, and the great and the good were present. So why are we so interested with this event? Well, really, it's to see the mixture of people who were present. So the Queen, obviously, with the great and good, were there to dedicate Queen Elizabeth, the ship in Rosyth, Scotland. But these gentlemen need to come into the frame because Alex Salmond was there, complete with his dad. Now, remember that Alex Salmond at the moment is running a Junta in Scotland with Kenny McCaskill and Sir Stephen House. McCaskill, of course, running law, and House running the solitary police force for Scotland. So they're looking after law, they're looking after police, they're looking after prisons. But interestingly enough, it's the same Scottish junta that is effectively committing treason by calling for the breakup of the United Kingdom. And they're also hot on the heels of a Scottish Republic, which, unless I'm mistaken, means that they don't want the Queen around. And so we have treason being committed under our noses, but everybody's mixing together quite happily. Well, where does this end? Well, if you're an Englishman, you should be deeply concerned because Alex Salmond's junta can now remove you from your home in England, put you in prison in Scotland with no formal court process, no formal representation, no jury, no public, no press. And of course, anti-child abuse campaigner Robert Greene spent 3 months, 1 week in prison in Perth, and he's now up to 49 days under house arrest. What is his crime? Paedophilia? Of course not. His crime is trying to protect children. So what an interesting bag. We have the Queen and our First Sea Lord mixing with people clearly committing treason by calling for the breakup of the nation state and the removal of Queen Elizabeth as sovereign.
I'd just like to say that I don't think it is treasonous to call for the removal of Queen Elizabeth as sovereign. It's treasonous to call for the removal of the sovereign, which is a different thing.
Okay.
So she occupies a seat and she's not doing the job.
So we'd like her replaced.
We'd like her replaced, please. Yes.
Yeah, I don't think that's what the Scots are after.
No,
though,
indeed it's not.
As the Express article showed. Well, okay, so if that's what's going on at the top of the UK power pyramid, what have you got for us, Mike?
Georgie Boy and his Wicked Willie are in India today for a 3-day visit, according to George's tweet.
So nothing important going on in UK at the moment?
No.
Get out the country.
So they've gone on holiday, which is nice for them. And the question is, why are they there? Well, during a speech that George gave this morning, he said to the Indians, let's link hands, embrace the future together, for good days are coming. Good days are coming, Brian.
Okay, that's not quite how I see it, but maybe I've got an alternative view.
Well, indeed. But they have set up a nice website, the William Hague and George Osborne Visit India website. But what's interesting here is that George doesn't seem to know how long he's there for, because this website, set up by the Foreign Office, says that he's there for 2 days, being today and tomorrow. Right. So he clearly is a bit confused. So why are they visiting now, do you think? Well, in a couple of weeks' time is the BRICS 24 conference in Brazil. So Brazil will host on the 14th, 15th and 16th of July the 6th summit of heads of state and government of the BRICS to be held in Fortaleza in Brazil. Of course, BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, China, India, and Spain, and they are intending to take the next step in establishing their alternative to the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. So the BRICS summit is expected to launch this $100 billion contingency reserve arrangement and also set up the BRICS Development Bank with the intention of developing infrastructure without the reliance on debt-laden money from the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. And they expect that the BRICS Development Bank will begin with initial capital of $50 billion and contributions of $10 billion and guarantees of $40 billion from each of the member states. And so that's probably what those guys are doing in India today, trying to make sure that this kind of anti-Western financial system approach doesn't work.
Yeah, we've got big polarisation here, haven't we? Because obviously we've got the Russians at the moment beginning to look after their own interests in a nice way. We've got the Chinese sitting there now. India's on the move. Right,
and Brazil and Spain. Of course, Spain completely destroyed by the European Central Bank and so on. Of course, it's not just this type of direct political intervention that is being put in place to try to stop this type of development on behalf of the BRICS, because Common Purpose, of course, has been working in India now for what, 2 years, is it?
At least. Fully
supported by King David himself. And of course, they're attempting to subvert these countries from the inside. And as we've already mentioned many times in this program, they are in India and they're now in China as well. And this article in the New York Times, it's a Chinese blog post. They've got a Sinosphere blog, which is coming from, it's like sort of similar to Alistair Cook's letter from America. This is like a letter from China. And they're focusing and featuring Julia Middleton. And just wanted to highlight one particular aspect of this because, of course, her new book is all about cultural intelligence. And she's saying that ultimately, I think that cultural intelligence is about openness, a refusal to lock yourself in your own culture behind a door you refuse to open, a belief that other cultures will enrich yours rather than dilute it, a willingness to use all encounters, whether helpful or grim, to build your cultural intelligence. And of course, what she's really talking about is just sort of turning everybody into a mush of nothingness. Yeah. Nothingness. So everybody is the same. There's no. I mean, they use this word diversity, but they don't really celebrate diversity at all. They want to destroy diversity.
Yeah, you say you're celebrating it. You say how wonderful it is to have people of different cultures, but then what you're actually doing by the back door is destroying all the cultures so that you'll end up with a blob.
Yes.
Interesting that, of course, Julia Middleton went very quiet after her exposure around Leveson. What did she do? Well, she went off and wrote another book or rewrote an old book to produce Cultural Intelligence. And what is this lady really up to?
Can I just make a slight correction?
Yes.
Because I am a bit empty-headed this morning, it has to be said. Been heavy weekend. Of course, South Africa, not Spain.
South Africa.
The BRICS. Yeah, apologies for that.
Okay, well, let's stick with Common Purpose. The Mail picking up on huge amounts of money being spent by the police for what they describe as left-wing Freemasons. Actually, they're talking about Common Purpose. It's neither left-wing nor right-wing. This is a totally different ideology. Very, very dangerous. It's Common Purpose. It's heading to one world government. But here we are, police forces hand £470,000 to what is a political charity that has absolutely driven to ramp up Leveson in order for the British state to get control of the press and media. So this article, pretty crunchy. And of course, they bring up Cressida Dick. There she is. Well, she's a guru. She's been thoroughly trained by Common Purpose. And of course, what you see is that the moment Common Purpose gets somebody into an organisation, in this case the police, they open the door to more and more of their future leaders. But what this article says, in the last 6 years, 22 forces have spent $467,547 on courses. Where's the information come from? Freedom of information request by the Sun on Sunday. So we'll say well done to the Sun on Sunday, because we just think you might have been looking at the website cpexposed.com. But we could be wrong. Well, what else can we say about this one? Well, I think we should bring in these people, because Jamie Rennie and Matthew Byrne just happen to have been two particularly vicious paedophiles closely linked with Common Purpose. We'll have a look at both of them in a second, but the bottom picture there unfortunately shows Matthew Byrne, who was not just an ordinary Common Purpose person. He was part of the Liverpool Advisory Board, Merseyside Advisory Board, which was selecting other people for Common Purpose training.
So what happens if you have a paedophile on the advisory board who's selecting other people for Common Purpose training?
Well, common sense says to me that he would have been selecting other paedophiles, but of course no background checks on him, so David Cameron and Heseltine, totally unsuspecting. Here they are in the bottom photograph, pictured alongside a particularly vile Common Purpose paedophile.
So a bit like the BBC, they knew nothing.
They knew nothing, and of course the police are using Common Purpose services. The police are not bothered that it's been exposed, particularly in the Sheffield area, that Common Purpose has been running training programmes to schools, getting in amongst young children with no proper CRB checks. But Cressida Dick, apparently in charge of security of Britain, anti-terrorism and so forth, but she's apparently not aware that the paedophiles have penetrated Common Purpose. No pun intended. So here they are. Here is the BBC report on abuse ringleader James Rennie. Why are we, excuse me, particularly interested in this? Well, if you read the text, James Rennie is serving a life sentence for sexually assaulting a 3-month-old, and for conspiring to get access to children in order to abuse them. He was sentenced to 13 years, but Judge Lord Clark, sitting with Lord Philip, reduced his sentence to 8.5 years. So there we are. We have a paedophile north of the border, and what do? We cut the sentence, even though he was abusing a 3-month-old. And of course, the UK column had to point out that Matthew Byrne there was sitting on that Merseyside board, choosing other Common Purpose future leaders. And what did he get up to? Well, 9,000 child porn images, a string of sex offences, 32 charges, including rape, assault by penetration, and false imprisonment. So there we are. There's one of Julia Middleton's chosen leaders, and of course no proper background checks by the police who are using the services of Common Purpose in the first place. Where does it lead us? Well, it leads us back onto the trail of high-level paedophile rings in Britain.
Indeed. So the Mail reporting that a Labour peer has been accused of 12 what they're calling horrendous attacks on men when they were children. But apparently this peer has not been arrested or questioned by the police.
Well, that's only appropriate, Mike, because...
These are historical allegations, because this stuff isn't happening anymore, as we know. This spans several decades and includes accusations of rape and other serious sexual assault. And the other thing that the Mail highlights in this article is that, as we, I think, mentioned last week, and other people have been doing the rounds of the internet on social media and so on, that Google has been apparently removing links from its search results if you search for Leon Britton, for example, and other search results. And strangely enough, the Mail points out, if you go and do the same search on google.com, which is in the United States, rather than google.co.uk, you get a different result without the results removed. So it seems that whatever request went into Google to remove those links only applies to the UK.
Yeah, but this is very serious, isn't it? People able to remove their history in order to suit the political agenda at the time. And of course, we've pointed out David Cameron, very, very close to Google Europe. I think somebody was a godmother to one of the children. May have got that wrong. I'll check that for tomorrow. But I'm going to say Cameron in bed with Google.
Now, a source, apparently, the Mail says a source told them, quote, "The sexual abuse that the peer has been accused of is extremely worrying."
Okay, but
I don't think
no investigation.
Indeed, the allegations are harrowing and must have affected the vulnerable boys significantly in later life. It's becoming clear that there is a problem with historic sex abuse in Parliament, because it's not happening anymore, is it? And police have to be allowed to access all the information needed to investigate these allegations. Incredible. It's just worrying.
Well, we'd say if you're an overseas viewer, please do encourage your friends and relations and other members of the public to watch UK Columns so that you can understand what the United Kingdom is really about at the moment, being governed by not only criminals and liars, but increasingly we're seeing the evidence for paedophiles.
But it's okay, because David Cameron tweeted out this morning that he's determined to establish the truth behind child abuse allegations and learn lessons from recent cases. No mention of prosecutions or imprisonment or anything like that.
We're just going to learn the lessons. Yeah.
And so, naturally enough, Theresa May is going to announce, if she hasn't done it already, is going to announce an inquiry, another judge-led corrupt inquiry designed to provide the correct answer, protecting key people and sacrificing a few. Perhaps I wouldn't possibly suggest that, but
and we've got Michael Gove also over the weekend saying, well, no, we don't want a public inquiry into child abuse. What we need to do is we need a nice barrister to actually look into it. We should have a single, maybe judge, look into it. We don't want a public inquiry because, as the BBC says, I don't think the public want to know the reality of child abuse.
Well, I didn't get a chance to see what Theresa May has announced or is going to announce. I don't know whether she's announced it yet before we came on air, but she's saying an independent inquiry. But of course, we've got to remember what Sir Humphrey Appleby told us on Yes Minister, because of course a rule of government is never to look into anything you don't have to, never start an inquiry unless you know what its findings will be. And I think that's the context in which this, whatever announcement Theresa May is going to make, should be seen.
Yeah. So what we know is that Theresa May absolutely not pushing to get to the bottom of what's going on with this.
No.
Let's just gently cover it up, brush it under the carpet. Well, all of the papers are starting to open their eyes, I think, and the Mirror here starting to move on another one. Tony Blair's minister accused of helping a convicted paedophile to foster young boys. And the story is that when a local council was actually refusing somebody to have the opportunity to foster young boys, a telephone call was made by this minister in order to try and overturn that local decision. So not only blatant interference by one of Tony Blair's cronies, but what was the objective? To allow a convicted paedophile to foster young boys. Perhaps somebody like to ask Mr. Blair what he knew about this. We could have him on stage alongside Liam Britton, couldn't we? And David Cameron, let's keep him in the spotlight. Political scrapbook here reporting Cameron aide Patrick Rock charged over 49 child abuse images. BBC, of course, has had Rolf Harris smashed all over the headlines for weeks, but this gentleman seems to have been quietly kept to the background because, well, maybe it might upset David Cameron.
But one thing that is for sure is that the Department for Public Prosecutions isn't doing anything about it. So here we've got the Independent reporting that Geoffrey Dickens gave a copy of his file to Sir Thomas Hetherington, and so the Department for Public Prosecutions didn't bother. Look, the DPP isn't going to do their job. The police aren't doing their jobs, and we can see that in both cases from the Holly Gregg and the Oxford and Sherwood Valley cases. We know that no judge-led inquiry is going to provide answers. And if they do get to the truth, they'll never report, just like Chilcot is never going to report. And so what options do we have? Well, of course, the answer may be to return to the idea of the grand jury. This is a common law body. It has investigatory powers with a view to bringing prosecutions. So instead of a judge-led inquiry, let's put it in the hands of 25 good people to discover the facts with the full force of the rule of law behind them, because let's face it, it's the rule of law which all these statutory bodies are subverting at every opportunity.
Yeah. Somebody in the chat box is saying, where is all this leading to? And we did have a little discussion on this before coming live, and it seems to us that what we've got brewing now is enough ammunition against the government in order to completely destroy people's confidence in the Westminster government. And if that was to happen, then maybe what we're looking at is a group of MEPs coming forward to say, well, obviously traditional members of Parliament in Westminster totally corrupt, covering up paedophiles. What you need are members of the European Party to run the country.
Yes, I think we've got to be pretty vigilant at times like these, because I don't believe that this is coming out in the press by accident, and I think there's an agenda behind it. So we've got to make sure that those who have committed criminal acts account and pay for those criminal acts, but that should not be used as a problem reaction solution type situation where something comes in on the back of it, which we would like even less.
Yeah. And we'll just end on one further subject with regard to paedophiles, NATO.
Yes, NATO has signalled that no new members for the present. So we've been talking about NATO expansionism quite a lot recently, but it looks like they're pulling back from that at the moment. So Georgia was, this is the ex-Soviet Republic of Georgia, was likely to be one, with a few others, Macedonia as well. Macedonia's foreign minister said that this is a step backwards. This article in dawn.com is saying the bottom line: the North Atlantic Treaty Organization celebrating important anniversaries this year of a dozen nation states, a dozen nations joining its ranks will welcome no new members when President Barack Obama and other leaders convene for a summit in Wales in early September. Right. Well, of course, Georgia is going to be extremely disappointed about that, and we have to remember that Georgia was used by NATO in 2008 to try to spark off the Third World War at that time, because Mikhail Saakashvili, who was the president at the time, absolute George Soros stooge, having led the Rose Revolution, financed and supported by the Open Society Foundation, of course. He was deployed to attack the people of South Ossetia in what was a very Ukraine-like situation, to try and draw Russia into something. It didn't work then, and it doesn't seem to be working now. Everywhere you look, institutions like NATO and other institutions, there seems to be a massive faction fight going on internally, doesn't there? Sort of fight between the nutters who want to bring us into something pretty nasty and people who are trying to pull them back from it. So I'm sure the Georgians are pretty unhappy about this. They made their position clear in 2008 when they offered South Ossetia autonomy from Georgia, but only along what they were calling European lines, with international guarantees, is how they said put it at the time. And this European-style autonomy was really defined by the Centre for Liberal Strategies, and they're based in Bulgaria. And they said that the entire region must become a post-modern European order with no nation-states. As a result, they said a clash with Russia was inevitable, because Russia, quotes, embodies the nostalgia both for the old European nation-state and for a European order organised around the balance of power and non-interference in domestic affairs of other states. So that was in 2008 that the Centre for Liberal Studies was really pointing out at that time that war with Russia is pretty much inevitable, so we might as well just get on with it. Well, they weren't able to get on with it at that point, but they're still trying to get on with it now. So good to see that NATO is not quite able to expand as quickly as they were hoping.
That's true. Worrying stuff. Well, let's return to UK and this gentleman, Mr. Booker from the Telegraph. This was the Telegraph on Saturday, I think. Judge slams Haringey Council over my most shocking family case ever. And Booker said of all the scores of cases he's followed over the past 5 years where families have been torn apart, one has stood out as the most shocking and harrowing of the lot. From 2010 on, when 5 children were removed from a Nigerian couple, Mr. and Mrs. Musa, and then a 6th was violently wrested from Mrs. Musa's arms by 6 police and 3 social workers when she was lying helpless on a hospital bed, breastfeeding the baby to which she'd just given birth. I wrote about this case in a heavily redacted form more than any other, and a 7th child was later also taken from her at birth. Now, what Mr. Booker doesn't appear to say in this article is that these Mr. and Mrs. Musa were both devout Christians, and according to the people that have been supporting them, the whole of the action against them by Haringey was a complete fabrication of the truth in order to steal the children from this couple. And of course, at the moment, both of them are still in prison, or that was the latest news that I had. So what we thought we would do is delve into this one a bit more deeply. We've been very careful with this case over at least a year because of the sensitivities. But we do also recognise that a lot of people have desperately tried to help this couple, a horrific case. So how does it happen that we can have children literally stolen from a mother and father? Well, if you want to see information yourself, go and have a look at this website, A Nigerian Family Destroyed by Haringey Council, and of course gagged from reporting. But there's the site, gloriamusa.wordpress.com. Well, this man is of great interest to us because he's Mr. Justice Holman, the judge from the case. Let's have a look at what he said. Haringey had secretly and blatantly disobeyed that earlier ruling by last year breaking off the children's contact for several months until in December they were allowed to meet for a final goodbye session. He goes on to say, but he was then even more astonished to discover that Haringey had managed to get the court website to remove the very judgment he had ordered to be published. In his own words, Haringey had gone completely behind my back to persuade Bailey to remove from the public website the judgment that the judge had deliberately placed there pursuant to the practice direction of the President of the Family Division, Lord Justice Mumby. And finally, again and again in his forensically argued judgments, Holman condemned Haringey for having deceitfully broken both procedures and the law. Now, this is the key issue here, because the judge is saying that Haringey has broken the law not once but several times, and yet we do not see any movement towards the arrest or prosecution of any individuals in Haringey Council. So we took a little look at the website. Very interesting logo there. I don't know what this has got to do with any form of local authority area. Most of it is waffle, but we are not talking about Haringey Council breaking the law. It's obviously people that break the law, and here is their senior leadership team. Now, we're going to say to date, and certainly at this present moment, we are not aware of any arrests for contempt of court, breaking the law, and the crime is stealing children. So let's focus in. Well, this man must have some responsibility. Nick Walkley, the Chief Executive Officer, sorry, that should be Haringey. And here we are, the leader, Claire Kober. What's she been up to? Well, there's been a bit of a problem, and what do? You have a reshuffle. It's good government practice. You're in trouble.
You don't arrest people or have them prosecuted, well, you reshuffle?
You reshuffle, Mike. That's the thing. So, ignored the law, guilty of contempt of court, broken the law, but there are no arrests. Now, people will be saying, well, why are people not being arrested? Well, we think it's to do with this. This was the clue. All the children of this couple stolen by the British state in secret courts with no jury, public or press. And UK column reported that John Tradewell, head of legal services for Staffordshire County Council, says in his own words, we, Staff's County Council and legal services, can do anything. That's what the man said. And clearly this is what is now happening, that local authorities have the power to simply put two fingers up to Britain's judges. I don't care what your ruling was. We, the local council, are not going to do anything.
Because it's no longer the case that no one is above the law.
well, do we have law? I think we're teetering on the edge at the moment as to whether there is any law in this country. But if a local authority, Haringey in the primary case, can simply say, well, we don't care what Judge Mumby has ruled, head of the family law division, we don't care what's happened in the court, we're going to do as we please. And in the Staffordshire case, the judge in that particular courtroom said he was stunned that Staffordshire was asking him to put a worldwide injunction on the taking of those other children so that, of course, people didn't understand what was happening. This brings us in very nicely to the fact the government is clearly going to censor alternative media. And we just remind you that the ATVOD saga goes on. This is an email from ATVOD to a Mr. Scott. Thank you for your further email. ATVOD has nothing further to add to our full published statement available on the website. Well, of course, ATVOD hasn't said anything of substance. We know they're making up the rules as they go along. This one we enjoyed because a lady sent us an email in which she'd said, well done, ATVOD, because essentially by your incompetence and aggression, you've highlighted yourself, and people around the world are now starting to home in on what ATVOD really is. So thank you for that, Lorna. And somebody else here kindly sent us links through to the original EU directive and UNESCO, very interesting, where we can see the source from which this control of the mainstream, control of the alternative press and media comes. So this is exactly what we need, people to take the battle on themselves.
Of course, it's not just YouTube being censored, because as Alex G mentioned on Friday night, perhaps a coincidence that the performing arts organisation that handles licensing for music that's played on radio stations and so on is now requiring people to not offer podcasts available for download if you're a radio station. But then, of course, we had this situation over the weekend where Dave in the United States, New York, with his X22 report, found that his YouTube channel had just been taken down for no apparent reason, no communications from YouTube. And he asked people on Friday and over the weekend to get onto YouTube and try to do something about it. Well, a piece of good news then, because his YouTube channel seems to have been re-established, put back up again. But you've got to ask the question, why did this happen in the first place? And what is going on?
I think the powers that be are getting very worried. Mike, I think it was Hillary Clinton, that lovely lady, said that basically we, the bad guys, are losing the media war. And I think there's panic. This is cornered rat syndrome. So they're lashing out. They don't want the truth coming out. They're going to use any means available. Google for censorship, ATVOD. And of course, let's not forget Julia Middleton and Common Purpose, because Common Purpose actually took down a few years ago cpexposed.com because the political charity Common Purpose did not want the truth coming out about what Common Purpose was up to. They're all scared, I think.
No, indeed. But of course, we've got to remember that ATVOD, a private company, so a private company becoming the policeman of YouTube in this country. Well, an amazing situation over the last couple of weeks with a private company, this time Microsoft, becoming the policeman over this organisation. So what happened was that on the 19th of June, Microsoft went to a US court and asked for an ex parte injunction to be placed on this company, which provides what's called dynamic DNS services. And of course, as they hint in their front page here, this is about converting domain names to IP addresses that you're given by your internet service provider, so that you can get access, remote access to your home computer very easily, for example. And Microsoft went off the court, basically said, well, in our opinion, these guys aren't following best practice on the internet, and some of their services are being used by hackers and other people. And so we basically want you, court, to hand over to Microsoft all this company's domain names, control of all this company's domain names, and then we will reroute all traffic that was going through this company's domain names through Microsoft's website, web servers, or servers hosted on a data center somewhere. And we will scan those and look at the content. And if we decide that the content is acceptable, we'll pass it on to its original destination. Now remember, this company is providing DNS services for individuals like you and I to use. And so what Microsoft was really doing was routing traffic that you and I were putting on the internet, if we happen to be using this company's services, through their services and scanning our traffic, our internet traffic. This is an incredible invasion of privacy. And Microsoft justified their actions saying that malware authors continue to pollute the internet. Domain owners must act responsibly by monitoring for and defending against cybercrime in their infrastructure. Now, according to noip.com, Microsoft claim that their intent is only to filter out the known bad host names in each seized domain, while continuing to allow the good host names to resolve. However, this is not happening. Apparently, Microsoft infrastructure is not able to handle the billions of queries from our customers. Millions of innocent users are experiencing outages as their services to their services because of Microsoft's attempt to remediate host names associated with a few bad actors. And so, as I say, this was an ex parte hearing, so no IP was not invited, weren't entitled to take part in it, and the judge just basically handed over control. Now, I think it was by Friday or Saturday, Microsoft had handed back control of 18 of the 23 affected domains, but they still have control over where those domains sit in the meantime, so they can take them back from noip.com at any point. And I think this is just a hugely dangerous precedent that a company like Microsoft, which, let's face it, has probably the worst security record on the whole internet, is becoming an internet policeman.
Yeah, policing for the wrong side. Well, one of the themes that we've been gently pushing across for some time is that as we watch events unfolding in UK and elsewhere around the world, common sense seems to have disappeared out the window. And one place where common sense has clearly disappeared is the NHS. We know the government is undertaking privatisation in front of our eyes, but many people working in the NHS talk about unbelievable chaos within the system, managers making bizarre decisions. The end result is that patients suffer, the staff suffer as well, because they're working what they described as a madhouse. Well, we were given a very interesting piece of information in the last few days, and that is that somebody had been referred to Derriford Hospital by their GP. This was for a specialist appointment, neurosurgery department in this case, and they got a reply back, which was from the clinical commissioning group. And the significance was, in the reply that they got back, it said that they were reviewing the GP's referrals, and you wouldn't necessarily be put through to the specialist that your GP had asked for. You might be refused. You might be offered alternative routes, but essentially a group of people who have not met you in person as a patient, they have not examined you in a clinical sense, sit in a room and decide that your GP clearly doesn't know what he's talking about, or she. So this is a very interesting, you've put a group of people between the GP and ultimate treatment. What's this to do with? I believe it's to do with cost cutting and weeding out people that the NHS now decide don't deserve care.
Rationing is the word.
Rationing is probably the word. So we took a little bit of a delve into Derriford Hospital. We enjoy doing that sort of thing. And we were fascinated to come up with a website of the chairman, and we'll show you a bit more about him. But what was he referring to with great gusto? He was talking about change in the NHS, and today is NHS Change Day. And I think, Mike, this is the area that you were looking at some months ago, where we were seeing senior managers of the NHS meeting for an NHS Change Day, and they were playing with crayons and piece of cardboard and other things. Yeah. But let's see what else was on this part of the particular website. Well, we had a poem. Bring us your sick, your fevered, your fragile, and we will soothe them and keep them safe, as if they were each and every each and every our very own. Bring your shattered limbs and ragged bodies, your splintered heads and your broken hearts. Now, I better not say any more because this work has been commissioned by Derriford Hospital, this poem, and we've got hospitals that haven't got the money to treat people, but they have got the money to commission poems in order to support change days where we're not going to deliver clinical treatment, but we are going to talk about change in the NHS. Well, where did this lot come from? Well, it came from this gentleman. Here he is, Richard Crompton. He was appointed by the Appointments Commission to serve as a non-executive chairman of Plymouth Hospital's NHS Trust. And what is his experience in the NHS? Well, absolutely nothing at all. He's Chief Constable of Lincolnshire Police. So he's a policeman. He's been involved in the Association of Chief Police Officers, private company setting policy for the police. And he's now been through a training course where he's so enamoured with common purpose type change that he's putting poems up on his little website. So if you want to know why the NHS isn't working, well, what's Richard Crompton more interested in? Well, he's particularly pleased because there's a diversity agenda moving forward as the Hindu community's now been welcomed into the frame. Now, those of you that listen to UK Column on a frequent basis will know it's not to do with Hindus or Christians or anything else. What we're saying is, what is the priority? Treatment of the sick, or is it something else pretty sick? We'll leave you to work this one out, but if you want to make progress, get a policeman in charge of clinical treatment. And we'll come back onto a story we reported a few days ago, and that was this one to do with Herald Scotland. David Lease, the chief reporter, produced some pretty hard-hitting articles attacking the whole of the Holly Gregg case. Nothing to see, no abuse ever carried out. Well, of course, Herald Scotland is a Newsquest publication, and we had been given screenshots of Newsquest internal computers showing access denied if you tried to go to the free Robert Greene website. Screenshots showing access denied. Now, we pointed out that Levy McRae, very, very powerful Scottish law firm looking after everybody, including Mr. Salmond, Eilish Angelini, etc. They also look after the Police Federation Scotland, Prison Officers Association. Here she is, Dame Eilish Angelini, ITM Mirror Group, Newsquest, Border Television Channel. So we thought, well, was there any connection really between Newsquest and the access denied? Well, we've been chasing Newsquest, and we have put them under a little bit of pressure, but they tell us that even though we have a screenshot of one of their computers saying access denied, even though we have Newsquest staff telling us that that site is blocked from different geographic locations from within the Newsquest servers, this is the official line from Newsquest. I repeat, Newsquest has not blocked the site in question.
So is he lying, or is he? What's going on? Because they did try to blame it on their internet service provider.
Well, they tried to blame it on Virgin. We know Virgin hadn't done any blocking, and say if it was just one people telling us, it was a bit of hearsay, but the people talking about this were deeply concerned if it were to be the case that Newsquest, a media outlet, was blocking access to free speech, and they provided us with a screenshot. But according to Mr. Blott, Newsquest isn't doing it. Could it be some buried cell in Newsquest is doing something that the managers don't even know about?
I find that a bit unlikely, to be honest.
Yeah, well, it's a mystery, isn't it? But whatever the reality is, somebody doesn't want you to see the free Robert Greene website because, of course, he's been campaigning to protect children. So there we are. If you want to know why the country's in such a state with schools, hospitals, potholes in the road, basically we've got criminals in power, and we now know that at least some of our MPs and establishment are involved with paedophilia. is it any wonder why we're prepared to go and bomb countries overseas? I don't think so.
No empathy.
Thank you for joining us. We will be back at same time tomorrow, and hopefully there'll be something light in the news.
Join us for the Crane Report and Fracking Nightmare later on, 7:30 and 9 o'clock respectively.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
Tomorrow.
Bye-bye.